Muzzle flashes lit up the rocky slopes like deadly fireflies as SEAL Team Charlie found themselves trapped in the ultimate nightmare, surrounded, outgunned, and watching their ammunition dwindle with each desperate trigger pull. 50 enemy fighters had them locked in a kill box with no escape. The radio crackled with the worst news possible: no support for 70 minutes. In combat terms, that meant everyone dies. But then, from somewhere high above the chaos, a single rifle shot rang out, different, precise, otherworldly. An enemy machine gun went silent. Then another. Someone was hunting the hunters, and the SEALs had no idea who their guardian angel was. I'm about to tell you the most incredible story of survival. You've never heard a tale that military officials still can't fully explain. So wherever you're watching from, New York, London, Tokyo, or anywhere in between, drop a comment below and let me know, because this story deserves to travel the world. The Carpathian Mountains stretched out like the backbone of some ancient sleeping giant. February wind cut through the valleys with teeth sharp enough to draw blood, carrying snow that fell in sheets rather than flakes. Master Chief Blake Harrison pressed his eye to his rifle scope, watching the ridgeline above through the white curtain of weather. Something felt wrong, that sixth sense every operator develops after enough missions, the one that whispers danger before logic catches up. Charlie 1, this is Charlie 3. Rodriguez's voice crackled through his earpiece. I've got movement 200 meters northwest ridge. Blake shifted his position behind the boulder, feeling ice crack beneath his weight. They'd been inserted 12 hours ago for what should have been a straightforward reconnaissance mission: locate a suspected arms cache, photograph it, get out. Simple. Clean. The kind of operation SEAL Team Charlie had executed dozens of times. Copy 3. All elements hold position, Blake whispered into his mic. His breath formed clouds in the freezing air. Charlie 2, you seeing this? Marcus Chen, his sniper, was positioned 50 meters to the east. Negative on visual, but I'm reading heat signatures. Multiple contacts moving into blocking positions. Blake's blood turned colder than the mountain air. Blocking positions meant this wasn't random, they'd been expected. His mind raced through the possibilities. Compromised intelligence. A leak? Or had they simply walked into someone else's operation? All Charlies, this is 1. Prepare for possible contact. ROE is weapons tight until... The mountain exploded. Machine gun fire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously, tracers cutting through the snow like laser beams. Blake rolled hard left as rounds chewed through the space he'd just occupied, sending rock fragments flying like shrapnel. His earpiece filled with overlapping voices, contact reports, position calls, the controlled chaos of professionals under fire. Contact front. Taking fire from the east ridge. Charlie 5 is hit. 5 is hit. Blake's training took over his body, moving before conscious thought. He brought his MK-18 up, found a target, a muzzle flash between 2 rocks, and squeezed off a controlled pair. The flash disappeared. Another appeared 30 meters left. He engaged, ducked, displaced. The fundamental rhythm of combat: shoot, move, communicate. Charlie Team, establish a perimeter. 2. Can you get elevation on those positions? Negative. Chen's voice was strained. They've got the high ground locked down. Count at least 12 shooters, wait. A pause. Chief, we've got problems. I'm seeing reinforcements moving up from the valley. Estimate 30+ foot mobiles. Blake's mind calculated odds with the cold precision of a computer. 7 SEALs against what was shaping up to be a reinforced platoon-sized element. In open terrain with good cover and sufficient ammunition, those were manageable odds. but trapped in a valley surrounded with limited ammo. Dragon Base, this is Charlie 1. Troops in contact requesting immediate close air support and QRF. Grid follows. Blake rattled off their coordinates while changing magazines' muscle memory, guiding his hands while his eyes tracked threats. The response made his stomach drop. Charlie 1 Dragon Base. Negative on immediate support. Weather has all air assets grounded. QRF is spooling up, but estimate 70 minutes to your position. 70 minutes. In a firefight that was an eternity. That was death. All Charlies conserve ammunition, Blake ordered. Controlled pairs only. We need to... An RPG shrieked overhead, detonating against the cliff face 20 meters behind them. Rock and ice rained down. Through the chaos, Blake heard Johnson scream, not the controlled communication of a professional, but the raw sound of pain. "4's hit bad," Williams called out. "Shrapnel to the abdomen. I need a medic here." Their corpsman, Davis, immediately began moving toward Johnson's position, staying low, using every scrap of cover. Blake laid down covering fire, his rifle barking in measured bursts. His magazine ran dry. He ejected slapped in a fresh one. How many did he have left? 4 or 5, not enough. Not nearly enough. The enemy fire intensified a wall of lead that kept their heads down. Blake could hear them coordinating, calling out in what sounded like Serbian mixed with something else. Professional. Disciplined. These weren't mountain bandits or local militia. These were trained soldiers. "Chief, I've got visual on their command element," Chen reported. "Northwest ridge approximately 400 meters, but I can't get a clean shot with this suppression." Blake made a decision. All Charlies were displacing to the rock formation grid reference Alpha 7. Bounding overwatch. 2 and 3. Your base of fire. Move. They began the deadly dance of a fighting withdrawal, half the team shooting, while the other half moved, then switching. It was textbook, except textbooks were written for situations where you had somewhere to withdraw to. They were simply trading one bad position for a slightly less bad one. Rodriguez went down halfway through the movement, his leg buckling. Blake saw him fall, started to move toward him, but Rodriguez waved him off. "Just clipped me, I'm good." He dragged himself behind cover, leaving a red trail in the snow. They made it to the rock formation, a cluster of van-sized boulders that provided decent cover, but no concealment. The enemy knew exactly where they were. Blake could see fighters maneuvering on both flanks, preparing for a coordinated assault. Classic hammer and anvil. They were about to be crushed. "Charlie 1, I need you to know something." Chen's voice was deadly calm in his ear. "I'm down to my last magazine for the long gun, maybe 40 rounds for the pistol." Blake checked his own ammunition. 3 magazines plus 1 in the weapon, maybe 90 rounds total. Around him, he could see his team doing the same mental math, coming to the same conclusion. They didn't have enough bullets to win this fight. Hell, they might not have enough to make it another 10 minutes. "All right, Charlies, listen up," Blake said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. "We're going to make them pay for every inch. When I give the signal..." A shot rang out. Different from the chaos around them. Deeper. More authoritative. A .338 Lapua Magnum by the sound of it. One of the machine guns that had been hammering their position went silent. Blake peeked around his cover, trying to locate this new shooter. Another shot. Another machine gun died. The enemy fire slackened noticeably, fighters ducking for cover, suddenly uncertain. "What the hell?" Williams voiced what they were all thinking. "Charlie team, this is Ghost 6. The voice that came through their comms was unlike anything Blake had heard before, calm to the point of being unsettling, professionally modulated, impossible to place. "Recommend you displace 30 meters south to the depression. You've got a 15-second window starting now." Blake had 1,000 questions, but this wasn't the time. All Charlie's move, now. They moved Rodriguez, limping Williams, half-carrying Johnson Davis, providing what cover he could with his carbine. As they dropped into the depression, barely more than a shallow ditch. But lower ground was lower ground. Blake watched the ridgelines. Another shot. A fighter tumbled from behind a rock, his rifle clattering down the slope. Another. An RPG team that had been setting up simply ceased to exist as a threat. Ghost 6. This is Charlie 1. Identify yourself. What's your affiliation? Charlie 1. Stay low. Enemy assault element approaching from your north. Approximately 18 fighters. Engaging now. Blake watched in amazement as the mysterious sniper began to systematically dismantle the assault element. It wasn't just marksmanship, it was artistry. The shooter wasn't simply taking targets of opportunity, he was destroying the enemy's ability to coordinate. Leaders first, then radio operators, then heavy weapons. In less than 90 seconds, what had been a coordinated assault became a leaderless mob. Chen, you got eyes on our guardian angel. Negative, Chief. But based on the shot angles, Jesus, he's got to be at least 800 meters out elevated position, probably that ridgeline to the southwest. In this wind, those aren't just good shots. They're impossible shots. The enemy fighters were panicking now. Some were trying to retreat back up the mountain. Others were digging in, and a brave few were still trying to advance. The invisible sniper punished each decision with mechanical precision. Blake watched a fighter break cover, sprinting for a better position. The man made it 3 steps before the shot caught him center mass, spinning him around like a rag doll. Charlie team, be advised you have a second element moving up from the valley. Estimate 20 fighters 3 minutes out. Ghost 6's voice remained impossibly calm, as if he were calling out a grocery list rather than tactical information. Ghost 6, we're black on ammo. Maybe 2 mags per man. We can't hold against 20 more. Roger, Charlie 1. Shifting fire. Recommend you utilize the respite to redistribute ammunition and treat casualties. Respite. The man had called this a respite. Blake gathered his team. Johnson was bad, Davis had him stabilized, but he needed a medevac yesterday. Rodriguez could fight, but couldn't run. They were down to less than 200 rounds between them. The math was simple and brutal. Chief, Williams said quietly, maybe some of us could break out, lead them away while we leave together or not at all. Blake cut him off. That's not negotiable. Above them, Ghost 6 continued his deadly work. Blake watched the second element through his scope as they advanced up the valley. They were moving tactically, using cover, maintaining spacing. Professional soldiers who knew their business. It wouldn't matter. The first one to die was the point man. He'd been moving along a rocky outcrop when the shot took him the impact, throwing him backward off the 30-foot drop. The second was a squad leader, identifiable by the way he'd been directing others. Then a machine gunner who'd been setting up to provide covering fire. But there were too many, and they were spreading out, making themselves harder targets. Some were going to get through. Charlie team, danger close. Recommend you take cover immediately. Blake didn't question it. Everyone down now. The explosion, when it came, was massive. Blake felt the shockwave compress his chest, driving the air from his lungs. Rock and debris rained down for several seconds. When he finally raised his head, ears ringing, he saw that a significant portion of the mountainside had simply collapsed. The advancing element had been directly beneath it. Ghost 6, what the hell was that? Improvised explosive. The previous residents left some interesting materials cached in these mountains. There was something almost like humor in the voice now. Charlie team, you have multiple survivors attempting to flank your position from the east. Engaging, but I can't get them all from this angle. Blake saw them 5 or 6 fighters moving through a cluster of rocks his team couldn't effectively engage from their current position. If they got set up there, it would be a turkey shoot. "We need to move," Blake said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they couldn't. Not with Johnson down, not with Rodriguez barely mobile. "Negative Charlie 1. Hold position. Solution inbound." Blake wanted to ask what solution, but the words died as he watched something impossible happen. The shot came from the complete opposite direction of where Ghost 6 should have been. It ricocheted off a rock face. Blake actually saw the spark change direction at nearly a right angle and struck one of the flanking fighters who'd been completely behind cover. "That's," Chen breathed. "That's not possible. You can't predict a ricochet like that. The variables, the wind, the angle." But possible or not, it happened again. And again. Each shot came from a different angle, as if Ghost 6 was somehow teleporting around the battlefield. The flanking element died in their covered positions, never understanding how they were being engaged. Charlie Team, primary threat neutralized. 12 hostiles remaining, all in defensive positions. They're trying to call for reinforcements, but I've already handled their radio operator. Blake did a quick count. 12 enemies. His team had maybe 50 rounds between them. Still bad odds, but survivable. Maybe. "Ghost 6, what's your ammunition status?" "Sufficient." That was all. No elaboration, no details, just that single word delivered with absolute confidence. The remaining enemies had gone to ground, terrified of the invisible death that had been stalking them. Occasionally, one would make the mistake of exposing themselves for a shot, and Ghost 6 would punish it immediately. It had become a stalemate, but time was on Charlie Team's side now. The QRF would arrive eventually. "Movement," Rodriguez called out. "They're massing for a final push. All remaining fighters." Blake saw it too. The survivors had figured out that staying put meant dying one by one. They were going to rush the SEAL position, accepting whatever casualties Ghost 6 could inflict in exchange for overwhelming the Americans at close range. "Charlie Team weapons free. Make your shots count." Blake lined up his first target, a fighter just breaking cover. His finger began to squeeze the trigger. "Charlie Team drop. Now, danger close." Blake didn't hesitate, throwing himself flat and yelling for his team to do the same. He heard the shots rapid, impossibly fast for a precision rifle. 8 shots in maybe 3 seconds. His mind was still processing the rate of fire when he heard bodies hitting the ground. "Clear. Threat neutralized." Blake slowly raised his head. The attacking fighters were down. All of them. He counted the bodies, 12. 12 shots. 12 kills. In the time it took most people to draw a breath. "Ghost 6. I need you to identify yourself. Who are you?" For a moment, there was only static. Then, someone who doesn't leave brothers behind. "Charlie Team, your extraction is 6 minutes out. Maintain position and keep your heads down. There may be stragglers." "Ghost 6, we have wounded. Our corpsman needs..." "Already aware, Charlie 1. Medical supplies cached 20 meters to your south underneath the flat rock with 3 white stripes. You'll find morphine quick clot and bandages." Blake looked at Davis, who was already moving toward the indicated position. Sure enough, he returned with a small medical kit, vacuum-sealed, and hidden beneath the rock exactly as described. "How long have you been watching us?" Blake asked. "Long enough. Patch your wounded Charlie 1. You're almost home." Blake could hear the helicopters now, their rotors echoing off the mountain walls. The cavalry finally arriving. But his attention was fixed on the ridgelines, trying to spot their mysterious benefactor. "Ghost 6, the QRF is here. We can extract you." "Negative Charlie 1. My exfil is already arranged. At least let me..." "Chief Harrison." The use of his name stopped Blake cold. "Take care of your team. Johnson needs surgery within the hour, or he won't make it. Rodriguez has arterial bleeding he hasn't told you about. Focus on them." Blake spun toward Rodriguez, who was indeed looking paler by the second, his hand pressed against his thigh, where red seeped between his fingers. "Doc Rodriguez needs—" When Blake looked back at the ridgeline, he thought he saw movement. A shadow against the snow there and gone. The helicopters came in hot door gunners, scanning for threats that no longer existed. Blake helped load Johnson onto the first bird, then Rodriguez. As the second helicopter lifted off with the rest of his team, Blake took one last look at the battlefield. Bodies scattered across the snow. Impossible shooting positions. Angles that shouldn't have worked. "Chief, we need to go!" The crew chief was yelling over the rotor noise. Blake climbed aboard, his mind still processing what had happened. As the helicopter banked away from the valley, he keyed his mic one last time. "Ghost 6, this is Charlie 1. Thank you." The response came after a long pause, so quiet Blake almost missed it. "The only easy day was yesterday, brother." Then static. Blake tried to raise him again, but there was nothing. Ghost 6. Whoever he was had vanished as mysteriously as he'd appeared. The helicopter climbed into the clouds, leaving the valley of death behind. Blake looked at his team, battered, bloodied, but alive. Every single one of them. In a fight that should have killed them all, they'd lost no one. Williams moved to sit beside him, having to shout over the rotor noise. "Chief, what the hell just happened?" Blake shook his head. He'd been in combat for 15 years. He'd seen exceptional shooting, impossible bravery, and miracles that shouldn't have been. But nothing like this. "I don't know, brother. I honestly don't know." Davis was working on Rodriguez, who was arguing that he was fine even as the corpsman pumped him full of morphine. Chen had his rifle across his lap, staring at it as if trying to understand how someone could make shots he couldn't even attempt. Johnson was unconscious, but stable, his breathing steady under the oxygen mask. "Chief?" The co-pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "Dragon Base wants a full debrief as soon as we land. They're saying the satellite footage doesn't make sense." "What do you mean?" "They're saying it shows one shooter engaging from multiple positions simultaneously. That's impossible, right?" Blake didn't answer. Nothing about the last hour had been possible. As they flew through the storm clouds, Blake found himself replaying Ghost 6's words. "Someone who doesn't leave brothers behind." The phrasing was specific, personal. This wasn't just some random guardian angel. This was someone who understood the brotherhood, who'd lived it. "Chen," Blake called out. "Those shots you saw, could you make them—" Chen, one of the best snipers in the teams, shook his head immediately. "Chief, I couldn't make those shots on my best day with perfect conditions and a week to practice. What we saw, that was something else. That was supernatural." But Blake knew it wasn't supernatural. It was training experience and skill honed to a level most people couldn't imagine. Somewhere out there was an operator former or current who'd just saved 7 lives and vanished into the wind. The helicopter touched down at forward operating base Dragon medical teams already waiting. Blake watched them wheel Johnson and Rodriguez away, then felt his legs finally give out. He sat down hard on the tarmac, the adrenaline crash hitting like a freight train. "Master Chief Harrison," a Lieutenant Colonel Blake didn't recognize, was approaching. Intelligence by the look of him. "I need to debrief you immediately. What you're describing, sir, with respect, I need to check on my men first." The Colonel's expression softened slightly. "Your men are in good hands, Master Chief. But I need to know about this Ghost 6. We have no record of any friendly assets in that area. No special operations, no CIA, nothing. I don't know what to tell you, sir. He was on our freck, knew our call signs, knew our names, saved our lives." The preliminary analysis of the battlefield suggests a single shooter engaging from at least 7 different positions across a span of 2 kilometers. In a blizzard, making shots that our ballistics experts are calling impossible. Blake stood up slowly, his body feeling every one of his 40 years. Sir, I can't explain it. All I know is that my entire team is alive because someone out there decided we were worth saving. The colonel studied him for a moment. Master Chief, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Do you think Ghost 6 was one of ours former team's guy? Maybe. Someone off the books. Blake thought about the voice on the radio, the calm professionalism, the terminology. The final words, a SEAL motto. I think, Blake said carefully, that warriors recognize warriors, and whoever Ghost 6 is, he's one of us in every way that matters. The colonel nodded slowly. Write your report, Master Chief. Every detail you can remember. We need to understand what happened out there. As Blake headed for the operations center, his satellite phone buzzed. Unknown number. Harrison. Your boys are going to be fine. The voice was different now, older, rougher, without the radio distortion, but Blake recognized it instantly. Ghost 6. Johnson will need 6 months of recovery, but he'll dive again. Rodriguez will bitch about the scar, but wear it like a badge of honor. Who are you? A pause. Someone who was in your position once. Valley of Ghosts, Afghanistan, 2008. My entire team should have died. Someone intervened. Someone I never got to thank. Blake's mind raced. Valley of Ghosts was legendary, a ranger unit ambushed, surrounded, saved by an unknown sniper who eliminated 43 enemy fighters before vanishing. That was you. You were the ranger unit. I was, and I've spent 17 years trying to pay that debt forward. Today was your turn, Master Chief. Someday it might be someone else's. You need to take care of your team, and Master Chief, that cached medical kit. There are 6 more spread throughout that valley. Different supplies. Make sure someone knows in case another team needs them. Wait, how many operations have you? The line went dead. Blake stared at the phone, then slowly put it away. He thought about the Ranger story about other operations over the years where teams had reported mysterious assistance, impossible shots, guardian angels that command could never identify. Williams appeared beside him. Chief Rodriguez is stable. He's asking for you. Actually, he's asking if you got Ghost 6's number because he wants to buy him a beer. Blake almost laughed. Tell him to get in line. As they walked toward the medical facility, Williams asked, Do you think we'll ever know who he really was? Blake looked out at the mountains, where somewhere out there a ghost was already moving toward his next mission, his next team that needed saving. I don't think we're supposed to know, Williams. I think that's the point. They entered the medical facility to find Rodriguez arguing with a nurse about wanting to get up, while Chen was trying to explain to a confused intelligence officer about ricochet angles and wind calculations. Johnson was still unconscious, but stable machines beeping steadily around him. Blake's team. Alive. All of them. He thought about Ghost 6's words, someone who doesn't leave brothers behind. In a world of classified operations and need to know, sometimes the most important truths were the simplest ones. Someone had their backs. Someone was watching. Someone who understood that the Brotherhood extended beyond unit patches and official operations. The debrief took 4 hours. Blake told them everything he could remember, every detail, every impossible shot. The intelligence officers took notes, consulted tablets, whispered among themselves. They showed him satellite footage that made no sense, heat signatures appearing and disappearing shots coming from positions that seemed empty seconds before. It's like he was teleporting, one analyst muttered. Or there were multiple shooters, another suggested. Blake knew neither was true. It was simpler and more complex than that. It was a mastery of terrain movement and marksmanship that defied conventional understanding. It was someone who'd turned themselves into a living weapon and chosen to use that weapon to protect others. 3 days later, when Rodriguez could walk and Johnson was conscious, Blake gathered his team in the recovery ward. He'd been struggling with how to write the official after-action report, how to explain the impossible. "Listen up," he said. "Command wants answers about Ghost 6. They want to know who, what, where, why. I've been thinking about what to tell them." "The truth," Chen suggested. "The truth is unbelievable," Blake replied. "The truth is that someone we don't know who won't take credit, who won't even show his face, saved all our lives. The truth is that there's someone out there operating completely outside the system, picking their own missions, being the guardian angel team's need." "So what do we say?" Williams asked. Blake had made his decision. "We say we received support from an unknown friendly asset who withdrew before identification was possible. We report the facts of what happened, but not our speculation about who or why. We protect Ghost 6 the same way he protected us." The team exchanged glances, then nodded one by one. "The only easy day was yesterday," Rodriguez said from his bed. "The only easy day was yesterday," they echoed. Later that night, Blake stood outside the base looking at the stars. The mountains loomed in the darkness, full of secrets and shadows. Somewhere out there, Ghost 6 was moving through the night, maybe toward another team that needed help, another impossible situation that required an impossible solution. Blake's satellite phone rang. He looked at it, another unknown number. He didn't answer. He knew it wasn't Ghost 6. That wasn't how the man operated. One contact, then gone. But as Blake headed back inside, he found himself thinking about the future. In 10 years, 15, when he was retired, and his knees finally gave out from too many jumps, too many missions, what would he do? He thought about Ghost 6, about the Valley of Ghosts, about debts that could never be fully repaid, but had to be tried. Maybe someday Blake thought he'd find his own way to pay it forward. Maybe someday he'd be the ghost someone else needed. The thought followed him into the building where his team was laughing about something Rodriguez had said, where Johnson was finally keeping food down, where life continued, because someone had decided they deserved that chance. 7 lives saved. 7 futures preserved. 7 warriors who would go home to families who would continue to serve, who would remember forever the day death came calling. And someone answered back with precision fire and impossible shots. Blake looked at his team one more time, then headed to write his report. He'd stick to the facts, the dry, tactical language that command expected. But between the lines in the spaces where truth lived, he'd try to capture something else, the reality that sometimes, just sometimes, angels wore ghillie suits and carried rifles, and they showed up exactly when needed most. The report would be classified, filed away, eventually forgotten. But the story would live on in the teams whispered in ready rooms, and team cages passed from one generation of operators to the next. The story of Ghost 6, the phantom sniper, the guardian who didn't leave brothers behind. And somewhere in those retellings, in those quiet moments before missions when warriors prepared to face death, someone would remember that they weren't alone. That somewhere out there, someone was watching. Someone who understood. Someone who would intervene if the moment demanded it. Blake finished his report as dawn broke over the mountains. He saved the file, encrypted. It sent it up the chain of command. The official record, such as it was. But the real record, the one that mattered, was written in the hearts of 7 SEALs who'd faced certain death and lived. Written in Rodriguez's blood that didn't spill out onto foreign soil. Written in Johnson's breath that still came steady and strong. Written in the tears Chen would never admit to crying when he'd called his wife to say he was coming home. The sun painted the mountains gold and crimson, a new day beginning. Blake thought he saw movement on a distant ridge, a figure perhaps, or maybe just shadows and imagination. He raised his hand in a salute just in case. Somewhere out there, Ghost 6 was watching. And for warriors in desperate valleys facing impossible odds, that knowledge made all the difference in the world. The metal of the challenge coin was cold in Blake's pocket. He'd found it in his gear that morning, though he was certain it hadn't been there before. One side showed a skull wearing a ghillie hood surrounded by 7 stars. The other side bore only coordinates and a date, the Valley of Ghosts, 2008. A connection across years and miles between warriors who'd never meet but understood each other completely. Blake gripped the coin tight, then walked back into the building where his team waited, where life continued, where impossible stories became unshakable truths. Behind him, the mountains stood silent, keeping their secrets. And somewhere among those peaks and valleys, a ghost continued his eternal watch, waiting for the next moment when brothers would need a guardian, when impossible shots would be the difference between tragedy and triumph, between last breaths and long lives. The legend of Ghost 6 would grow with each telling, but the truth was both simpler and more profound than any story could capture. It was about duty that transcended order's brotherhood, that ignored boundaries, and the fundamental truth that warriors protect, warriors always and forever, even from the shadows, even without recognition, even when the shots seem impossible and the odds insurmountable. The classified files scattered across Colonel Mitchell's desk told a story that shouldn't exist. 6 months had passed since the Carpathian incident, and every intelligence agency from Langley to Fort Meade had been quietly investigating. Blake watched the colonel's face grow more troubled with each page he turned photographs and after-action reports, creating a pattern that defied explanation. 15 confirmed incidents in the past 3 years, Mitchell said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Different continents, different units, always the same MO. Impossible shots, perfect timing, 0 trace evidence except for these. He held up a photograph of a shell casing, .338 Lapua Magnum, with an inscription barely visible. The only easy day was yesterday. Blake leaned forward, his coffee long cold in his hands. 15 Command told us we were an isolated incident. Command told you what you needed to know, but Master Chief, what I'm about to share doesn't leave this room. Mitchell pulled out a tablet encrypted to military standards that would make NSA jealous. Operation Red Sand, Syria, 2022. Delta Force unit pinned down by ISIS fighters. 37 enemy KIA, all precision shots from a distance that shouldn't be possible in a sandstorm. The video was grainy, captured by a drone operating at maximum altitude. Blake could make out the Delta operators trapped in what had been a school muzzle flashes surrounding them, like angry fireflies. Then, one by one, those flashes went dark. The shots came from nowhere and everywhere, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. "Watch this part," Mitchell whispered, though they were alone in the skiff. He zoomed in on a timestamp. See that the ballistics team calculated the shooter's position based on impact angles. He would have had to move 400 meters in 12 seconds to make those shots sequentially. Olympic sprinters couldn't do that on a track, let alone in full kit across rough terrain. Blake felt his skin prickle. Multiple shooters. That's what we thought, until this. Mitchell switched to thermal imaging. A single heat signature, moving in ways that hurt to watch, appearing and disappearing like a ghost walking through walls. One shooter. One impossible, inexplicable shooter. The door to the skiff opened, making both men jump. A woman entered early 40s wearing civilian clothes but carrying herself with military precision. Her eyes were the kind that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Master Chief Harrison, meet Agent Sarah Chen, CIA Special Activities Division. Blake shook her hand, noting the calluses of someone who spent serious time on the range. Agent Chen, let me guess you're here about Ghost 6. I'm here about a myth that's costing my agency sleep, she replied, sitting down without invitation. A myth that saved your life. A myth that, according to every database we have access to, doesn't exist. She produced her own tablet, sliding it across to Blake. London 2021. SAS team conducting our hostage rescue. Building rigged with explosives, dead man's switch. 60 seconds from detonation when someone takes out the bomber from 1,800 meters through a window the size of a laptop screen. Through rain and fog. The image showed the aftermath. A hotel room with one very dead terrorist and one very intact dead man's switch, the bomber's finger still on the button, but the button never pressed. The shot had severed his spinal cord at exactly the right vertebra to prevent any muscular contraction. That's not marksmanship, Blake breathed. That's surgery with a rifle. Bolivia 2023. Chen continued swiping to the next file. Green Berets training local forces ambushed by cartel sicarios. 43 enemy dead in 6 minutes. The Berets never fired a shot. They were too busy trying to figure out who was helping them. Each file told the same story with different details. Elite units in impossible situations saved by possible shooting. No identification, no recognition, sought just violence applied with such precision, it became almost beautiful. And always, always those shell casings with that same inscription. We've had every analyst from crypto to behavioral science working this, Mitchell said. The pattern suggests someone with Tier 1 training, but the execution exceeds anything in our training programs. We're talking about someone who's transcended conventional warfare. Blake thought about the voice on the radio, the absolute calm in the middle of chaos. He told me he was repaying a debt. Valley of Ghosts, Afghanistan, 2008. Chen's fingers flew across her tablet. Valley of Ghosts, here. Ranger unit surrounded 43 enemy KIA attributed to unknown sniper support. She looked up sharply. You think Ghost 6 was one of those Rangers? He said someone saved his team, and he's been paying it forward ever since. That would make him at least 40 years old, Mitchell calculated. To be making shots like this at that age. Experience trumps youth, Blake said, remembering his father's words from decades ago. And if he's been doing this for 17 years, he's not practicing, he's perfecting. Chen stood abruptly, pacing to the wall, where a world map marked recent operations. We're missing something. These incidents, they're not random. Look at the pattern. She began marking locations with red pins. Syria, Bolivia, London, Somalia, Ukraine, the Philippines. Blake saw it first. They formed a rough circle around certain key locations. He's protecting specific areas, Blake said, or specific types of operations. Counterterrorism hostage rescue personnel recovery. Chen listed. Never offensive operations, never regime change or political actions. Only defensive, only when Allied units face overwhelming odds. Mitchell's secure phone rang. He listened for 30 seconds, his face going pale. Understood. We're on our way. He hung up, already moving. We have a situation. SEAL Team 4 is compromised in northern Pakistan. Surrounded communications cut QRF is 90 minutes out. Blake was on his feet instantly. I need to be on that QRF. Negative, Master Chief. You're grounded pending medical review. But... Mitchell paused. If our ghost is listening, if he's somehow monitoring our operations... Chen was already working her phone. I've got ISR assets redirecting. If he's out there, if he's moving to assist, we might finally get him on camera. They rushed to the operations center, where screens showed real-time satellite footage of a Pakistani mountain village. The imagery was clear enough to see individual fighters moving through the streets converging on a compound where the SEALs had holed up. 60-plus enemy combatants, the watch officer reported. Team 4 has casualties, limited ammunition. They're requesting immediate extract, but weather has all air grounded for at least another hour. Blake watched the tactical situation deteriorate in real time. The enemy was coordinated patient, tightening the noose professionally. These weren't Taliban remnants or local militants. This was a trained force. There, Chen pointed at one of the screens. Vehicle approaching from the north. Single occupant. They watched the vehicle stop 2 kilometers from the village. A lone figure emerged immediately, disappearing into the rocky terrain. The satellite tried to track him, but kept losing the signal as if the figure knew exactly where the blind spots were. Team 4. Team 4, this is Dragon Base. Be advised, possible friendly asset approaching your position from the north. How copy? Static, then gunfire, then a desperate voice. Dragon Base, we're taking heavy fire. 2 wounded, black on ammo. We need. The transmission cut. On the screen, enemy fighters were massing for what looked like a final assault. Blake gripped the edge of the console hard enough to leave marks. Then it started. A fighter on a rooftop suddenly pitched backward, then another. The attacking force hesitated, confused. Their confusion cost them 3 more men in rapid succession. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Look at the shot angles. The satellite caught some of it muzzle flashes from positions that seemed impossible shots threading between buildings through windows around corners. In 3 minutes, the attacking force lost 15 fighters and all cohesion. Team 4, this is Overwatch 7. The voice came through the operations center speakers, different from Ghost 6, but carrying the same preternatural calm. Recommend you displace to the blue building southwest corner. You have a 30-second window. Blake and Chen exchanged glances. Different call sign, different voice modulation, but the same precise instructions, the same impossible knowledge of the tactical situation. They watched Team 4 move, carrying their wounded, as Overwatch 7 systematically destroyed anyone who tried to interfere. A technical vehicle came around a corner and exploded before its gunner could traverse his weapon. An RPG team setting up 3 blocks away simply ceased to exist. How is he seeing all this? The watch officer asked. He'd need eyes everywhere. He does have eyes everywhere, Chen realized, pulling up another screen. He's hacked into their security cameras. Every shop, every street corner. He's using their own surveillance against them. The enemy force was in full retreat now, but Overwatch 7 wasn't finished. Blake watched him herd them like sheep, pushing them into a kill box of his own design. When they tried to flee north, shots from that direction turned them back. East was denied by precision fire that dropped anyone who tried. They were being channeled west toward the desert away from Team 4. QRF is 40 minutes out, Mitchell announced. They won't need it, Blake said quietly. He's already won. Look. The remaining enemy fighters had abandoned their weapons, abandoned their vehicles, abandoned everything except the desperate need to be somewhere else. The village was clear. Team 4 Overwatch 7. Landing zone is clear. Mark your position with IR for incoming extract. Overwatch 7 Team 4. Actual. Who are you? We need to... Negative Team 4. Focus on your wounded. Your boy Martinez needs immediate surgery or he'll lose that leg. Tell the flight medic to prep for arterial repair." Blake felt a chill. The same specific medical knowledge, the same concern for the wounded that went beyond tactical necessity. "Overwatch 7, we owe you. You owe me nothing. We protect our own. Overwatch 7 out." The operations center erupted in controlled chaos as the QRF launched early, taking advantage of the cleared landing zone. Blake kept his eyes on the satellite feed, watching for any sign of their guardian angel. Nothing. The figure had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. "Got something," Chen announced 20 minutes later. Local Pakistani intelligence reported a vehicle matching our unknown's description. Driver paid cash for gas, kept his face covered, spoke perfect Urdu with a Islamabad accent. Islamabad accent. Mitchell frowned. Our analysts said he was American. Or he's talented enough to be anyone he needs to be, Blake suggested. Different voices, different languages, different identities. Chen's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, then hung up, looking shaken. That was Langley. While we were watching Pakistan, someone hit a human trafficking ring in Albania. 32 traffickers dead, all precision shots, all .338 Lapua Magnum. The freed hostages reported a single shooter who spoke perfect Albanian, called himself Guardian 3. "He's not one person," Mitchell said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "It's a team, has to be." Blake shook his head. "No, it's one man with multiple identities, multiple staging areas, probably multiple weapon caches. He's built an entire network just to do this." "That would take millions of dollars, years of preparation," Chen protested. "Or one very motivated individual with the right background." Blake pulled up the Ranger file from 2008. 17 years to plan, to prepare, to perfect. Someone who survived the worst day of his life and decided to make sure others didn't have to. The door burst open. A young analyst rushed in, tablet in hand. "Ma'am, sir, you need to see this. We've been running facial recognition on every database we have, cross-referencing with the partial image from Pakistan." The image was blurry, caught in the split second the figure passed between two buildings. Half a face turned away, but the computer had found something. 92% match to Sergeant First Class Michael Reeves, 75th Rangers killed in action, Valley of Ghosts, Afghanistan, 2008. The room went silent. Blake stared at the screen, at the official death certificate, at the memorial page that listed Reeves among the fallen. "That's impossible," Mitchell said. "We don't make those kinds of mistakes. If he was listed as KIA, unless someone wanted him listed that way," Chen said slowly. "Unless someone very high up decided that Michael Reeves needed to die so that someone else could be born." Blake remembered the voice on the phone, the weight of years in it. He said his entire team should have died. What if they did officially? What if the survivor was given a choice? Stay dead and operate outside the system, or come back to a world that would never let him be what he needed to be. "A ghost," Chen whispered. "A real ghost, legally dead, free to operate without restrictions, without oversight, without the bureaucracy that gets operators killed." Mitchell was already making calls, his voice urgent and low. Blake couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Whatever Mitchell was learning, it was big. "Team 4 is secure," someone announced. "All personnel recovered, 2 critical but stable." Blake felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Another team saved another impossible situation, resolved by impossible means. Mitchell returned, his face grave. "I just spoke to someone who doesn't officially exist at a department that's not in any government directory. Michael Reeves did die in Afghanistan, officially. But there was a program, Black Budget Beyond Black, designed to create deniable assets for situations where official involvement was impossible. And they chose him, Chen asked. He chose himself. Apparently after the Valley of Ghosts, after seeing his entire team killed after being saved by someone he never identified, Reeves approached certain people with a proposal. Let him die officially, give him resources and freedom, and he'd become what the Rangers needed, a guardian angel unbound by politics or bureaucracy. Blake thought about the dedication that would take. To give up your name, your identity, your entire life to become a shadow protecting others. How many operations? Hundreds, Mitchell said quietly. Maybe thousands. Every time one of our units gets into something impossible, every time the math doesn't work, he's there. Different names, different voices, but always the same result. We need to contact him, Chen said. Bring him in, debrief, maybe even offer official support. No, Blake said firmly. You bring him in, you kill what makes him effective. He operates outside the system because the system is what fails. The moment you make him official, he becomes bound by the same rules that get operators killed. Chen started to argue, but her phone interrupted. She listened, her expression cycling through surprise, fear, and finally resignation. Understood. She hung up, looking at Blake and Mitchell. That was my station chief. He just received a message through channels I won't discuss. One word, stop. Stop looking for him, Mitchell interpreted. Stop trying to identify him. Stop investigating. Just stop. Chen pulled up her files, then one by one began deleting them. Orders from so far up I can't even see the top. Blake understood. Someone somewhere with enough power to make CIA back off was protecting their ghost. Maybe the same people who'd helped him die in the first place. Maybe others who understood that some weapons were too valuable to expose to light. So we just pretend this never happened, Mitchell asked. We remember that 7 SEALs are alive because it did happen, Blake corrected. We remember that Team 4 made it home. We remember that somewhere out there, someone is watching over our people. Chen finished deleting her files, then stood to leave. For what it's worth, Master Chief, I'm glad he saved your team. And I'm glad we're stopping this investigation. Why? Blake asked. Because heroes should be celebrated. But guardian angels, they should be left alone to do their work. After she left, Mitchell and Blake sat in silence watching the feeds from Pakistan, where Team 4 was being loaded onto helicopters. Martinez was on a stretcher, but gave a thumbs up to the camera alive, because a ghost had decided he should be. You know what bothers me most? Mitchell finally asked. What's that? We train the best warriors in the world. SEALs, Delta Rangers, all of them. But somehow one man has become better than all of them. How? Blake thought about it, remembering the voice on the radio, the absolute certainty in every word. Because we train soldiers to fight wars. He trained himself to save lives. Every shot, every decision, every moment is about one thing: bringing our people home. That kind of focus maintained for 17 years. That doesn't make you better. That makes you something else entirely. What? Necessary. That night, Blake stood on the same spot outside the base where he'd been 6 months ago, looking at the stars. His satellite phone rang. Unknown number. This time he answered. You need to stop looking for me. The voice was different again, but Blake recognized the cadence. They already have. Orders from on high. Good. Master Chief, what I do works because no one knows how I do it. The moment there's a file, a pattern, a predictable response, our enemies adapt. I remain effective because I remain unknown. I understand. But Michael Reeves died in Afghanistan. His name is on a wall. His family got a flag. His brothers mourned him. Let him rest. Then who are you? A long pause. I'm whoever I need to be to bring our people home. Ghost 6. Overwatch 7 Guardian. 3, 100 other names for 100 other missions. I'm the shot that shouldn't be possible. The voice that comes when all seems lost. The hope that arrives precisely when hope dies. That's a hell of a burden to carry alone. Who says I'm alone? Every operator I save, every team that makes it home, they carry a piece of it. You carry a piece of it. And someday when your knees finally give out and your eyes can't make the shots anymore, maybe you'll find your own way to pass it on. Blake felt the weight of those words. The only easy day was yesterday. The only easy day was yesterday, brother. Take care of your team. The line went dead. Blake looked at his phone, then deliberately deleted the call log. Some secrets were worth keeping. 3 weeks later, Rodriguez was back on limited duty arguing with medical about when he could return to full operations. Johnson was still in recovery, but already planning his comeback. The team was gathered in their ready room, going over training schedules, when Chen appeared on the television. He was watching the news, a report about an earthquake in Turkey. Rescue operations, thousands trapped, international aid pouring in. The reporter was interviewing a Turkish Special Forces officer who was describing a collapsed building where they'd heard survivors but couldn't reach them. Too dangerous, too unstable. Then the officer paused, looking off camera. Wait, someone's going in. I don't know who that is. The camera swung to show a figure entering the collapsed structure, moving with the same liquid grace Blake remembered. Professional, purposeful, impossible to stop. The feed went shaky, but they could hear it, the crack of shifting concrete, the screams of survivors, and then, miraculously, people emerging from the rubble. Who was that? The reporter was asking. Who went in there? The Turkish officer was shaking his head. I don't know, but he's bringing them out. He's bringing them all out. Blake and his team watched in silence as survivor after survivor emerged, guided by someone the camera could never quite catch clearly. When the last child was carried out, when the structure finally collapsed completely, the figure was nowhere to be found. That was him, Rodriguez said quietly. That was our ghost. No, Blake corrected. That was someone who doesn't exist, saving people who would have died, asking for nothing in return. Chen changed the channel, uncomfortable with what they all knew, but couldn't say. The next report was about a hostage situation in the Philippines that had ended mysteriously when the hostage takers had all been found unconscious, their weapons disassembled, the hostages free. Him too, Williams asked. Does it matter? Blake responded. What matters is that people are alive who shouldn't be. Later, alone in his office, Blake opened his desk drawer and pulled out the challenge coin he'd found after the Carpathian mission. 7 stars around a skull in a ghillie hood. He'd researched it quietly, found nothing official, but discovered similar coins in the possession of a Delta operator, an SAS trooper, a Green Beret. All survivors of impossible situations, all saved by impossible interventions. A fraternity of the saved, connected by a ghost who refused to let them die. Blake's computer chimed. A secure message, no sender ID. He opened it to find coordinates and a date. A mission briefing for an operation that didn't exist in a country where they weren't supposed to be to save people who officially weren't there. At the bottom, a simple note. They'll need Overwatch. Blake deleted the message, but memorized the information. He thought about Michael Reeves, about the choice to die officially, so others could live actually. He thought about his own career winding down toward retirement, toward a life of fishing and memories. Or toward something else. Something necessary. He picked up his secure phone, dialed a number he wasn't supposed to have. It's Harrison. I want to discuss my retirement options. The unofficial ones. The voice on the other end was careful. That's an irreversible decision, Master Chief. I understand. But someone once told me that warriors protect warriors. I'm interested in learning how to protect them better. Someone will be in touch. Blake hung up, looking at the challenge coin one more time. Somewhere out there, Ghost 6 was moving toward his next mission, carrying the weight of every life he'd saved and every shot he'd had to take. But maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have to carry it alone forever. The fraternity of ghosts had room for more than one guardian angel, and Blake had 17 years of experience that was too valuable to waste on fishing. He thought about Rodriguez's leg healing stronger than before, about Johnson's determination to return to the teams, about all the operators around the world who would face impossible odds tomorrow or next week or next year. They deserved a guardian, someone watching from the shadows, someone who could make the impossible shots when the moment demanded it. Blake made his decision. Some men were born to be warriors. Others were born to be legends. But a rare few chose to become something more. Protectors of protectors, guardians of the guardians' ghosts, who ensured that heroes made it home. The stars were bright over the base satellites, tracking through the night sky, watching everything and nothing. Somewhere among those electronic eyes, Ghost 6 was probably watching too, identifying the next crisis, the next team in trouble, the next impossible shot that would save everything. Blake closed his eyes and made a promise to himself, to his team, to every operator who'd ever faced death in a foreign land. The fraternity of ghosts would grow. The guardian angels would multiply. And as long as warriors stood in harm's way, someone would be watching over them. Someone would make the impossible possible. Someone would ensure that the only easy day was yesterday, but tomorrow would still come. The abandoned warehouse in Prague looked like nothing special from the outside, just another relic of the Cold War, slowly surrendering to rust and time. Blake stood in the shadows across the street, watching for any sign of surveillance, any indication that this was a trap. 3 months had passed since his retirement papers had been filed, since Master Chief Blake Harrison had officially ceased to exist in any meaningful way. The transition had been surprisingly smooth handled by people who clearly had experience in making operators disappear. A figure emerged from the darkness beside him, moving so quietly that even Blake's trained senses hadn't detected the approach. The man was older, perhaps 60, with eyes that held the weight of too many secrets and too many graves. "You came," the man said simply. It wasn't Ghost 6's voice, but it carried the same quality of absolute certainty. "Did I have a choice?" Blake asked. "There's always a choice. Michael Reeves made his. Now you're making yours." The man handed Blake a phone, its screen showing a live feed from somewhere that looked like Somalia. "Team Neptune is about to walk into an ambush. 43 minutes from now, they'll be surrounded by approximately 80 fighters. The QRF won't launch for 55 minutes. Do the math." Blake studied the feed, his mind already calculating angles, distances, probable positions. "They'll be slaughtered. Unless someone intervenes. Someone who doesn't exist, who can't be traced, who operates outside every rule that gets operators killed." The man paused. "Someone like you're about to become." "Where's Ghost 6, I thought?" "Michael is handling a situation in Myanmar, a Delta team caught between government forces and rebels. He can't be in 2 places at once despite what the legends say." The man smiled grimly. "That's why the fraternity needs to grow." Blake felt the weight of the moment. Once he stepped into that warehouse, Blake Harrison would be as dead as Michael Reeves. Everything he'd been, everything he'd built would become a memory, maintained only for the sake of those who'd known him. "My team," will be told you died in a training accident. Heroically, of course. They'll mourn, they'll move on, they'll never know that you're still watching over them. The man turned toward the warehouse. Or you can walk away now. Go home, fish, write memoirs that will be redacted into meaninglessness. Your choice. Blake thought about Team Neptune, about mothers who would get folded flags instead of hugs, about children who would grow up with photographs instead of fathers. The choice had been made the moment he'd seen those coordinates. Inside the warehouse, the transformation began. The first floor was exactly what anyone would expect, empty, dusty, forgotten. But the freight elevator descended far deeper than the building should allow, opening into a facility that belonged in a spy novel. Weapons lined one wall, every caliber, every configuration, all untraceable. Another wall held communications equipment that would make the NSA jealous. But it was the third wall that stopped Blake cold. Photographs covered every inch, some professional, most candid. Everyone showed an operator who'd been saved by a ghost. SEALs, Delta Rangers, Marines, even foreign allies. Hundreds of faces, hundreds of lives, hundreds of families that remained whole because someone had made impossible shots at impossible moments. Every one of them would be dead, the man said quietly. Michael saved the first batch. Others have saved more. Now it's your turn. Others. How many ghosts are there? Enough. Never enough, but enough. The man moved to a weapons rack, selecting a rifle with practiced ease. The official designation is the Phantom Protocol. Unofficially, we're the dead who keep the living alive. Blake was about to respond when every screen in the facility came alive. The same feed from different angles, Team Neptune moving through Mogadishu's maze of streets, completely unaware of the fighters massing 3 blocks away. 38 minutes, the man said. The aircraft is waiting. You'll insert here? He pointed to a position on the map, approximately 900 meters from the kill zone. The wind is 15 knots from the northwest, gusting to 20. Temperature is 32 Celsius. The rifle is already zeroed for those conditions. How could you possibly know? Because Michael has been tracking this situation for 6 days. He identified the ambush, calculated the response time, knew he couldn't make it back from Myanmar in time. So he called us. The man handed Blake an equipment bag. Your designation for this operation is Phantom 9. Your voice modulator is preset. Your extraction route is planned. All you have to do is make the shots. Blake's hands moved automatically, checking the rifle, the ammunition, the spotting scope he probably wouldn't have time to use. The weight felt familiar, comforting, like putting on an old uniform that still fit perfectly. 20 minutes later, Blake was on an aircraft he couldn't identify, flying toward coordinates he'd never officially visit. The pilot never spoke, never turned around, might have been a robot for all the humanity he displayed. Blake used the time to study the target package street layouts, building heights, probable positions. His mind began to see the geometry of death, the angles that would save lives. The insertion was smooth, a fast rope onto a rooftop that officially didn't have any American assets anywhere near it. Blake moved to his position, set up the rifle, and checked his watch. 12 minutes until contact. Through the scope, he could see Team Neptune clearly. 6 operators moving with professional caution, checking corners, maintaining spacing. They were good, but good wouldn't be enough against what was coming. Phantom 9 in position, he said into the throat mic, his voice emerging distorted, unrecognizable. Copy, Phantom 9, the man's voice came back. Phantom 6 sends his regards. Says to remember you're not there to kill them all. You're there to break their will. Blake understood. A pile of bodies would create martyrs, but systematic, terrifying precision that made the enemy question whether they were fighting men or demons that created survivors who would spread fear. Movement caught his eye. 3 blocks north, fighters emerging from doorways taking positions. More on the rooftops setting up machine guns with overlapping fields of fire. Blake counted 30 so far, with more certainly hidden. Neptune team. This is Phantom 9. Advise you halt movement immediately. You're walking into an ambush. The team froze, their leader's voice coming back cautious, but professional. Phantom 9, this is Neptune Actual. Identify yourself and authentication code. Authentication code is your daughter's middle name, the one you've never told anyone because it was your grandmother's name. Sarah. Blake had memorized the personal details, the things no enemy could know. Lieutenant Morrison, you have 40+ hostiles converging on your position. Recommend immediate displacement to the building on your south 2nd floor. How did you, who is this? Someone who's about to even the odds. Move, now. The team moved, and Blake began his work. The first shot took the enemy commander in the shoulder, spinning him around but not killing him. The man's scream echoed through the streets, sowing confusion. The second shot destroyed a machine gun's receiver, rendering it useless. The third went through a wall. Blake had calculated the angle based on the shadow of a fighter inside and emerged to strike an ammunition cache that exploded in a shower of sparks. The enemy fighters were shouting now, trying to locate him. Blake shifted position slightly, just enough to change the angle, and continued. He put a round through a fighter's water bottle, soaking him in what he'd probably think was his own blood, for a terrifying moment. Another shot took a rifle out of someone's hands, leaving them unharmed, but shaking. Phantom 9 Neptune Actual. We're taking fire from the east. Blake swung the rifle. Found the shooters, 3 of them, in a perfect line. One bullet adjusted for windage, and it passed through all 3 men's shoulders, non-fatal, but devastatingly effective. They fell like dominoes, their screams adding to the chaos. The enemy was starting to panic. Some were fleeing, others firing wildly at shadows. Blake encouraged their fear with shots that came too close for comfort, that made the ground explode at their feet, that turned their cover into deadly space. But more fighters were arriving, pouring in from the surrounding buildings. Blake counted 50, now too many to handle with psychological warfare alone. Time to increase the pressure. He targeted a fuel barrel he'd identified earlier, the shot igniting a fireball that sent fighters diving for cover. In the confusion, he took 3 more clean shots this time. Center, mass, removing key leaders who were trying to rally their forces. Phantom 9, we're pinned down east side of the building, 2nd floor. Blake could see them through a window, crouched behind overturned furniture as rounds chewed through the walls. The fighters were coordinating better, now someone with training taking charge. They were setting up a crossfire that would make the building a death trap. Blake made a calculation, then took a shot that shouldn't have been possible. The bullet entered through a window, ricocheted off a metal doorframe at exactly the right angle, traveled down a hallway, and struck the fighter who'd been coordinating the assault. The man dropped, and his subordinates froze, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Neptune team displaced to the roof. 30 seconds. Blake gave them cover, his rifle singing a deadly song. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, knee shots that took fighters out of the fight without killing them. Weapons destroyed, cover compromised. He was everywhere and nowhere death, from any angle mercy or judgment delivered, seemingly at random. On the roof, Team Neptune set up a defensive position, while Blake continued to thin the enemy's ranks. But ammunition was becoming an issue. He'd started with 60 rounds. He was down to 15. Phantom 9 Neptune Actual. We've got a problem. They're bringing up RPGs. Blake saw them 2 teams setting up rocket launchers that would turn the building into rubble. The range was extreme, the wind gusting unpredictably. He had 2 shots to save 6 lives. The first shot was textbook, if textbooks were written by angels of death. The RPG gunner fell his finger slack on the trigger, but the second team was behind partial cover, only inches of the launcher visible. Blake did something Michael Reeves had taught him through studied example. He stopped thinking and started feeling. The wind wasn't an obstacle. It was a partner. The distance wasn't a challenge. It was an opportunity. The rifle wasn't a tool. It was an extension of his will. The shot curved, actually curved around the cover, and struck the RPG warhead. The explosion took out the entire team and a significant portion of the building they'd been hiding in. "Holy shit!" someone on Neptune team breathed over the radio, but Blake was already tracking new threats. Enemy reinforcements were arriving in vehicles, technical trucks with mounted weapons. He put a round through the lead vehicle's engine block, another through the second vehicle's front tire. Both crashed, blocking the narrow street and preventing others from following. Down to 8 rounds. Phantom 9 QRF is 15 minutes out. Can you hold? Blake assessed the situation. At least 30 fighters remained scared, but still dangerous. Team Neptune was secure for the moment, but wouldn't stay that way once the enemy regrouped. Roger. Stand by for the finale. Blake had been saving one target, waiting for the right moment. The enemy's ammunition cache, poorly hidden in a building basement, but visible through a half window at ground level. The shot would have to be perfect through the window. Through an interior door they'd left open down a flight of stairs he could only partially see, and into containers of ammunition he could only assume were there based on fighter movement patterns. He took a breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger with the same gentle certainty a parent might use to brush hair from a sleeping child's face. The explosion was spectacular. The entire building lifted 6 inches before collapsing. Secondary explosions rippled out as ammunition cooked off, sending fighters running in every direction. The psychological effect was immediate and total. Whoever they were fighting could reach out and touch anything, anywhere, at any time. The remaining fighters fled. Not a tactical withdrawal, not a regroup. They ran like men who'd seen death itself stalking the streets. Neptune team, your path is clear. Recommend immediate extraction to the south. QRF will meet you at grid reference Alpha 3. Phantom 9. Who are you? Who do you work for? Blake was already packing his equipment, preparing for his own extraction. I'm nobody, Lieutenant. Just a guardian making sure you get home to Sarah and little Sarah. How can we thank? You can thank me by staying alive. By being smarter, faster, better. By making sure the next team that needs a guardian angel doesn't need one quite as badly. Blake paused, then added, The only easy day was yesterday. Yesterday was yesterday, Morrison replied, recognizing the phrase. You're one of us, aren't you? Or were. Take care of your team, Neptune Actual. Phantom 9 out. Blake made it to his extraction point. Just as the helicopter arrived, the same silent pilot who might have been carved from stone. As Prague appeared below them, Blake finally allowed himself to feel what had just happened. 6 lives saved, 6 families preserved. The weight of it was overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. The warehouse was quiet when he returned. The man from before was gone, but Michael Reeves was there still in the gear he'd worn in Myanmar, looking exhausted but satisfied. Heard you had an interesting first day, Michael said, his real voice rougher than any of his modulated personas. 13 dead, 20+ wounded Team Neptune extracted safely, Blake reported. The 13 necessary. Leaders and the most committed. The wounded will spread fear. The dead can't. Michael nodded approvingly. You learn fast. The Myanmar situation required 42 kills. Government forces and rebels both decided Delta Team was responsible for something they weren't. No choice but to clear a path. They stood in comfortable silence, two dead men comparing notes on saving the living. How do you handle it? Blake asked finally. The weight of being everyone's last hope, by remembering the alternative. Every photo on that wall represents a family that stayed whole, a team that stayed intact, a mission that succeeded despite impossible odds. That weight you're feeling, that's not burden, that's purpose. Blake looked at the wall of photographs, found Team Neptune's picture already added. Someone had been watching, documenting, maintaining the record of lives saved. There's something else, Michael said, producing a challenge coin. This one was different from the one Blake had received in the Carpathians. The same skull in a ghillie hood, but now surrounded by 9 stars. Welcome to the Fraternity Phantom 9. Blake took the coin, feeling its weight, heavier than metal, should be carrying the mass of responsibility and honor combined. What's next? Michael pulled up a screen showing multiple operations in progress worldwide. Red dots marked units in contact or about to be. There's always a next. Tomorrow, a French Special Forces unit in Mali will walk into a minefield while under fire. The day after, a SAS team in Syria will be betrayed by their local guide. Next week, Marines in the Philippines will face 3-to-1 odds with no air support. We can't save them all. No, Michael agreed. But we save who we can, and sometimes like today, that's enough. Blake's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Coordinates, a time, a unit designation. Another team that would need a guardian angel, another impossible situation that demanded an impossible solution. You should rest, Michael advised. The flights are long, the shots are hard, and the weight only gets heavier. But Blake was already studying the intelligence package, his mind calculating angles and distances. Somewhere in the world, operators were preparing for a mission that would go wrong in ways they couldn't predict. They'd face death and overwhelming odds, and in their darkest moment they'd hear a calm voice on their radio telling them how to survive. They'd never know that voice belonged to a dead man, a ghost who'd given up everything to become their guardian. They'd never know about the warehouse in Prague, the fraternity of phantoms, the network of angels that watched over them. All they'd know was that when death came calling, someone answered back with precise fire and impossible shots. Someone who didn't leave brothers behind. Someone who ensured that the only easy day was yesterday, but tomorrow would still come. Blake looked at his reflection in the dark window, seeing not Master Chief Harrison, but Phantom 9, a legend being born, a ghost taking shape, a guardian finding his purpose in the shadow between life and death. The next message came through marked urgent. A SEAL team in Venezuela compromised, surrounded 60 minutes from any support. The kind of situation that created Gold Star families and memorial walls, unless someone intervened, someone impossible. Blake was already moving toward the equipment room when Michael called out, "Blake, remember we're not heroes. Heroes get remembered. We're ghosts. We get results." Blake paused at the doorway, looking back at the man who'd shown him the path. What happens when we're too old for this, when our eyes fail and our hands shake? Michael smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Then we become the voice in someone else's ear, telling them about impossible shots and guardian angels. The fraternity always continues. Death itself couldn't stop us, age certainly won't. As Blake headed for his second mission, he thought about Rodriguez and Johnson Williams, and Chen, all of Team Charlie living their lives, continuing their missions, never knowing their old chief was still watching over them from the shadows. The thought should have been sad, but instead it filled him with purpose. He'd found his war not against any nation or ideology, but against death itself when it came for his brothers. Every shot would be a prayer, every mission a resurrection, every saved life a victory against the dark. The aircraft was waiting, engines already running. The pilot still silent as Stone had the coordinates programmed. Somewhere over Venezuela, American operators were about to face their worst day. But their guardian angel was coming. And death itself would learn to fear the ghost in the machine, the phantom in the scope. The impossible shot from the impossible angle that turned certain death into unlikely survival. Blake settled into his seat, checking his equipment one more time. 60 rounds, 1 rifle, 1 voice modulator, and the will to make the impossible possible. It would be enough. It had to be enough, because somewhere a mother was going to get a phone call not about a flag-draped coffin, but about her son coming home. Somewhere children would keep their father. Somewhere brothers in arms would live to fight another day. All because a ghost decided they were worth saving. The aircraft lifted off into the Prague dawn, carrying a dead man toward a mission that didn't exist to save lives that officially wouldn't be in danger in a place America wasn't supposed to be. But Blake Harrison was dead. Phantom 9 didn't care about official. He cared about brothers, about the mission, about the sacred duty that transcended death itself. The only easy day was yesterday, but with guardians in the shadows, tomorrow remained possible. The Venezuelan jungle pressed in from all sides like a living thing, humid breath and reaching fingers of vine and shadow. Blake had been in position for 6 hours, watching the SEAL team's situation deteriorate from bad to catastrophic. The intelligence had been wrong about everything: the number of hostiles, their equipment, their training. What should have been a simple reconnaissance had become a death trap with no exit. Through his scope, Blake watched Team Titan's leader, Lieutenant Commander Torres, trying to establish communications while blood seeped through the bandage on his shoulder. They'd lost their radio operator in the first exchange of fire. Now they were blind, deaf, and bleeding in hostile territory, with 60-plus enemy combatants closing in. "Phantom 9 in position," Blake whispered into his throat mic, the words traveling to Prague, where Michael Reeves was coordinating from the warehouse. "Copy, Phantom 9. Be advised we have a problem." Michael's voice carried an edge Blake had never heard before. "Satellite shows additional forces moving in from the north. Estimate 100-plus fighters arriving in approximately 20 minutes. Blake's blood chilled. He had 40 rounds and a team that didn't even know he existed yet. The math was impossible even for a ghost. "Phantom 6 recommend abort. Extract me, and we'll try to—" "Negative. We don't leave brothers behind. Stand by." The line went quiet for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. Then Michael's voice returned, different now, carrying the weight of a decision Blake didn't yet understand. "Phantom 9, you're about to have company. Phantom 3 is inbound to your position 5 minutes. Blake's mind raced. He'd never met another ghost besides Michael, didn't even know how many existed. The thought of working with another phantom should have been reassuring, but something in Michael's tone suggested otherwise. Movement below caught his attention. The enemy was getting bold, moving into assault positions. Blake took his first shot, dropping a machine gunner who'd been setting up to rake Team Titan's position. The crack of the rifle echoed through the jungle, and immediately the enemy response was different from anything Blake had experienced. Instead of panicking, they coordinated. Hand signals, disciplined movement, overlapping fields of fire. These weren't cartel thugs or local militia. These were professionals. Blake engaged 3 more targets in rapid succession, each shot buying Team Titan seconds, rather than minutes. Return fire began seeking his position, forcing him to displace. As he moved through the undergrowth, he heard another rifle different caliber engaging from the opposite ridge. Phantom 3 had arrived. Through his scope, Blake saw the effects immediately. Surgical shots that didn't just kill, but demoralized. A fighter's weapon destroyed mid-aim. Another's radio exploded next to his ear. A third found his boot pinned to the ground by a bullet that passed between his toes. Phantom 9, Phantom 3. Suggest coordinated engagement pattern. You take north sector, I'll handle south. The voice was female, professionally modulated but unmistakably feminine, even through the distortion. Blake's surprise lasted exactly 1 heartbeat before training took over. Copy, Phantom 3, engaging north sector. They worked in deadly harmony, their shots creating a symphony of destruction that turned the enemy's coordinated assault into chaos. Blake would wound a fighter, driving his comrades to cover where Phantom 3 would be waiting. She would destroy a piece of equipment, forcing enemies into the open where Blake had already calculated their movement. But Team Titan was still pinned, still bleeding, still dying by degrees. Phantoms, this is Overwatch. A third voice, older, graveled with exhaustion. Titan's comms are down, but I've got eyes on their senior chief. He knows Morse. Watch his rifle. Blake shifted his scope to Team Titan's position. Sure enough, the senior chief was moving his rifle in deliberate patterns. Short, 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 long, 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 short, short, short. SOS. Then more complex patterns. 6 wounded, 2 critical black on ammo, the Overwatch voice translated. They're asking for divine intervention. They're about to get it, Phantom 3 responded. Phantom 9. I've got something special at Grid 37 Alpha. On my mark, put a round exactly where I'm about to shoot. Blake found the grid reference, a cluster of trees that looked unremarkable. Phantom 3's shot struck first bark, exploding from a trunk. Blake fired precisely into the same spot, his bullet following hers through the hole she'd created. The explosion was massive. Hidden ammunition cache, perfectly concealed, catastrophically detonated. The blast wave knocked down a dozen enemy fighters and created exactly the chaos Team Titan needed. Titan, team. This is Guardian Angel. If you can hear this move now. Southeast 40 meters, there's a cave system. Blake watched Torres's head snap up, looking around wildly for the source of the transmission. Then training took over. He gathered his team, supporting the wounded, and they moved. The enemy tried to pursue, but Blake and Phantom 3 had turned the jungle into a killing ground. Every path became a fatal funnel, every piece of cover a potential tomb. Fighters began refusing orders to advance their leaders' threats, less frightening than the invisible death stalking them. North force is accelerating, Overwatch reported. 15 minutes. Blake checked his ammunition. 18 rounds left. Phantom 3 couldn't have much more. They'd need every shot to be perfect, and even perfection might not be enough. Then he saw something that made his blood freeze. Among the enemy forces, a figure moved differently from the others. Professional, purposeful, unafraid. The man raised a rifle, an expensive customized weapon, and began scanning the ridgelines with the practiced patience of a trained sniper. Phantom 3, we have a problem. Enemy sniper, West Ridge. I see him. He's good. Former Russian Spetsnaz by his movement patterns. Phantom 3's voice carried professional respect. This is about to get interesting. The enemy sniper fired the shot, passing close enough to Blake's position that he felt the sonic crack. Not a miss, a message. The sniper knew approximately where they were, was telling them he knew. Blake displaced immediately, Phantom 3 doing the same from her position. The enemy sniper tracked them, his shots always seconds behind, always close enough to force them to move, but never quite connecting. He was hurting them, Blake realized, pushing them toward specific positions where his ground forces could engage. "He's better than good," Blake muttered, diving behind a rock formation as another shot showered him with stone fragments. "But he's alone," Phantom 3 responded. "And we're not. Overwatch, can you paint him? Stand by." 30 seconds passed. "Laser on target. He's painted." Blake understood immediately. The enemy sniper was focused on them, not looking for a third threat. He and Phantom 3 fired simultaneously, their shots converging from different angles. The enemy sniper had no chance, even his exceptional skills couldn't overcome simple geometry. But his death created a new problem. The ground forces, seeing their sniper fall, went berserk. They charged Team Titan's cave position in a human wave, accepting casualties for the chance to overrun the Americans. Blake and Phantom 3 killed 15 in the first 30 seconds, but more kept coming. Blake's ammunition dwindled 10 rounds, 8-5. "Phantom 9, I'm black on primary, switching to secondary." Phantom 3's pistol was audible now, closer range, still deadly, but without the reach needed to protect Team Titan effectively. Blake made a decision that would have been suicide for anyone but a ghost. He abandoned his position, moving down the slope toward the enemy, closing the distance to where every shot would count. 3 rounds left. An enemy fighter broke through toward the cave. Blake's shot took him center mass. 2 rounds. Another fighter with an RPG. The shot had to be perfect through the jungle, through leaves and branches to strike the warhead before the fighter could fire. Blake made it. 1 round. The last bullet had to count for everything. Blake saw the moment developing, 3 fighters converging on the cave entrance, Team Titan's last defender, visible just inside, raising an empty rifle like a club. 1 bullet. 3 targets. Impossible. Blake aimed for something else entirely. The limestone formation above the cave entrance, weathered and cracked, held in place by a single crucial point of stone. His bullet shattered it. Tons of rock cascaded down, sealing the cave entrance just as the fighters arrived. Team Titan was trapped, but safe. The enemy was shocked, but regrouping. And Blake was out of ammunition, with hostile forces closing on his position. "Phantom 9, get out of there." Phantom 3's voice carried genuine fear. Blake drew his knife, preparing for a final stand that would buy seconds at most. Then he heard it, helicopters approaching, fast and low. Not American aircraft by the sound. Russian-made, probably Venezuelan, military. "All Phantoms, we have a bigger problem," Overwatch announced. "Government forces incoming. They think the firefight is cartel-related. They're going to hit everything that moves." The helicopters created chaos that worked in Blake's favor. The enemy ground forces scattered, caught between the ghosts they couldn't see and the government forces they couldn't fight. Blake used the confusion to reach a cached supply point. Michael had marked spare ammunition and equipment hidden months or years ago for exactly this situation. Reloaded. Blake rejoined the fight with renewed fury. The government forces were indiscriminate, their door gunners spraying the jungle with heavy machine gun fire. Enemy fighters, already demoralized by the Phantoms, broke completely. What had been an organized force became a rout. "Titan team, this is Guardian Angel. Charges are preset on the cave seal. When you hear the extraction birds, count to 10 and blow the entrance." Blake watched Torres acknowledge with a hand signal through a gap in the rocks. The man was pale from blood loss, but still fighting, still leading. "Phantom 9 government forces are targeting our position," Phantom 3 reported. They've identified muzzle flashes. A helicopter turned toward Blake's ridge, its gun swiveling to engage. Blake did something insane. He shot the helicopter. Not to destroy it, but to send a message. His bullet struck the windscreen exactly between the pilot and co-pilot, spiderwebbing the glass without penetrating. The helicopter immediately peeled off the pilot, deciding whatever was on that ridge wasn't worth investigating. "Extraction birds inbound 2 minutes," Overwatch announced. Blake could see them now. American helicopters flying fast and aggressive, their door gunners already engaging targets. The government forces, recognizing superior firepower when they saw it, withdrew. The remaining enemy ground forces simply evaporated into the jungle. The cave entrance exploded outward, Team Titan emerging into the smoke and confusion. Blake and Phantom 3 provided cover as they moved to the landing zone, their shots clearing a path through the last desperate enemies who tried to interfere. As the helicopters touched down, Blake saw something that stopped his heart. One of the wounded SEALs being loaded was Rodriguez, his Rodriguez from Team Charlie. The man wasn't supposed to be operational yet, wasn't supposed to be in Venezuela, wasn't supposed to be dying from a gut wound that had soaked his entire uniform red. Blake's next shot wasn't professional. It was personal. The fighter who'd been lining up another shot on the helicopters didn't just die. He was erased, the bullet striking with such force that it lifted him off his feet. The helicopters lifted off Team Titan, secure Rodriguez still alive, but fading. Blake watched them disappear into the distance, his hands shaking for the first time since becoming a ghost. Phantom 9 displaced to Extraction Point Alpha. Phantom 3 ordered, her voice gentle despite the modulation. "You did good." Blake moved through the jungle on autopilot, his mind, with the helicopters carrying Rodriguez to medical care that might not be enough. At the extraction point, he found Phantom 3 waiting, a figure in full tactical gear, face hidden, but something familiar in her stance. "You knew him," she said. It wasn't a question. "I trained him, led him, left him to become—" Blake gestured at himself at what he'd become. A guardian who just saved his life. She pulled back her hood, revealing a face Blake recognized from intelligence briefings. Captain Sarah Mitchell declared KIA in Afghanistan 3 years ago. "We all left someone behind to become this. The question is whether we can live with it." They extracted in separate helicopters to maintain operational security. Blake's flight was silent, except for the rotors and his own thoughts. Rodriguez was alive because Phantom 9 had been watching. But Rodriguez was there at all because Blake Harrison hadn't been. Back in Prague, the warehouse felt different. Michael was there along with 2 others Blake didn't recognize. More ghosts, more guardians who'd given up everything to save everyone. "Rodriguez is stable," Michael said immediately. "He'll make it. Full recovery expected." Blake nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "There's more," Michael continued. "The operation in Venezuela was a setup. Someone leaked Titan's position, wanted them eliminated. We're tracking the source." "Government cartel?" Blake asked. "Neither. Private military company trying to eliminate competition for a contract. They didn't count on guardian angels." One of the other ghosts, a man with Australian accent bleeding through his voice modulator, spoke up. "We've identified their leadership. They'll be in Bogota tomorrow night. Unfinished business, if you ask me." Blake understood. The Phantoms didn't just save lives, they removed threats to those lives. Sometimes that meant impossible shots in impossible situations. Sometimes it meant ensuring certain threats never got the chance to threaten again. "I'll take it," Blake said. "We'll take it," Sarah corrected. "You've had my 6 twice now. Time I returned the favor." Michael nodded approvingly. Phantom 3 and Phantom 9 operation designation is retribution. Make it clean, make it clear, make it costly for anyone who thinks targeting American operators is acceptable. Blake looked around the room at his fellow ghosts, warriors, who'd died officially, so they could live operationally, heroes whose names would never be known, but whose actions would ripple through generations of saved lives. "What happens when we get them all?" Blake asked. "When every threat is neutralized, every team saved." Michael smiled grimly. "Then we'll have earned our rest. But that day isn't today, and it won't be tomorrow. Evil doesn't take leave, so neither do we." Sarah handed Blake a folder, the Bogota intelligence package. As he read it, his mind was already calculating angles, studying photographs, identifying positions. The men who'd tried to kill Rodriguez, who'd nearly succeeded in eliminating Team Titan, were about to learn that some mistakes were fatal, even when they seemed successful. "One more thing," Michael said, producing another challenge coin. This one was different. Instead of stars around the skull, there were names. Not full names, just initials and dates. Blake recognized his own BH 2020. Among dozens of others. "Every phantom who's ever served," Michael explained. "We may be ghosts, but we're not forgotten. Not by each other." Blake pocketed the coin, its weight, a reminder of the fraternity he'd joined, the brotherhood that transcended death itself. Tomorrow he and Sarah would board a plane that didn't exist on any flight plan. They'd eliminate threats that would never make the news. They'd ensure that other teams, other Rodriguez's and Torreses, would live to fight another day. But tonight, Blake stood on the warehouse roof looking at the stars over Prague. Somewhere, Rodriguez was breathing through a ventilator, his body fighting to heal. Somewhere, Team Titan was debriefing, trying to explain their miraculous survival. Somewhere, other teams were preparing for missions that might go wrong, unaware that guardian angels were already moving to protect them. Blake's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number, just 2 words that meant everything. He's awake. Rodriguez was going to make it. The guardian angel had done his job, even if Rodriguez would never know his old Master Chief had been watching over him. Sarah joined him on the roof, her own phone in hand. "Just got word. The PMC leadership will all be in one location tomorrow. 15 targets, minimal security. They think they're untouchable." "They're wrong," Blake said simply. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "They are." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 ghosts preparing for tomorrow's haunting. The Prague night was cold and clear, perfect for contemplating the strange path that had led them here. Blake thought about the warehouse in Afghanistan, where Michael Reeves had died and been reborn. He thought about his own death, the training accident that had freed Blake Harrison to become Phantom 9. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked. Blake considered the question. He'd given up his name, his life, his identity. He'd never see his family again, except from shadows. He'd never receive recognition for the lives he saved. But Rodriguez was alive. Team Titan was alive. Hundreds of operators would go home to their families because ghosts walked in the darkness. "No regrets," Blake said finally. "Just determination." Sarah smiled, the expression barely visible in the starlight. "Good. Because tomorrow we send a message. Tomorrow we remind the world that American operators are off limits, that there are consequences for targeting our brothers and sisters." Blake nodded, already visualizing tomorrow's operation. 15 targets who thought they were predators about to learn they were prey. It would be surgical, precise, and absolutely devastating. "The only easy day was yesterday," Blake said. "And tomorrow," Sarah added, "will be their last." The Bogota skyline glittered like broken glass against the Colombian night as Blake and Sarah observed the private military company's headquarters through their scopes. The building was a fortress of steel and glass, 30 floors of legitimate business, hiding 3 floors of operations that had killed more American operators than any terrorist organization in recent years. Tonight, that would end. 15 targets, all present, Sarah confirmed, her voice steady through the comm. The board meeting they've been planning for months. Every decision-maker who authorized the Venezuela operation. Blake adjusted his position on the adjacent rooftop, 1,200 meters from the target building. The range was extreme. The wind was gusting between buildings, and they'd have seconds before security responded. It should have been impossible. For ghosts, impossible was simply Tuesday. Phantom 6. This is 9 and 3 in position, Blake reported. Michael's response came from Prague, bounced through 17 proxy servers, and encrypted beyond any agency's ability to intercept. Copy. Be advised, we've intercepted communications. They know about the Phantom Protocol. They're discussing countermeasures. Blake felt his blood chill. If the PMC knew about the ghosts, operational security had been compromised at the highest levels. Sarah must have had the same thought, because her next words carried an edge sharp enough to cut. They know we exist, but not that we're here. Proceeding with mission. Through his scope, Blake could see the boardroom clearly. 15 men sitting around a mahogany table, each responsible for operations that had killed American servicemen and women for profit. The man at the head of the table, David Kruger, was presenting something on a screen, satellite photos of American operations, detailed intelligence that should have been classified beyond their reach. They have inside information, Blake muttered. Someone in our government is feeding them. Focus on the mission, Sarah replied. We'll deal with the mole later. Blake was about to respond when movement caught his eye. On the building's helicopter pad, an aircraft was spinning up. Not unusual, except for the timing and the fact that, according to their intelligence, no flights were scheduled. We have a problem. Someone's rabbiting. Through his scope, Blake saw 3 figures moving toward the helicopter. He recognized one immediately. Alexei Volkov, former Spetsnaz Alpha Group, now the PMC's head of operations, and the man who'd personally planned the Venezuela ambush. He's mine, Blake said, already calculating the shot. 1,200 meters through gusting wind to hit a moving target about to board a helicopter. The bullet would need to curve to fight physics itself. -9. You take him, the others scatter. Stick to the plan. But Blake was already seeing something else through his scope. Volkov was carrying a tablet, and on its screen, barely visible, was a live feed. Blake recognized the location immediately, the safe house in Virginia, where Team Charlie was conducting a training exercise. His old team being watched in real time by the enemy. 3 Volkov has live surveillance on Team Charlie. They're being targeted right now. Sarah's response was immediate. Take the shot. Blake's world narrowed to the scope, the target, the impossible mathematics of making a bullet do what bullets weren't designed to do. He breathed out slowly, feeling the building sway minutely in the wind, calculating its effect on his trajectory. His finger began the slow squeeze. The helicopter's rotors were at full speed now, creating a downdraft that would affect the bullet's path. Volkov was 5 steps from the aircraft. 4. 3. Blake fired. The bullet left the rifle at 850 meters per second, began its arc across the Bogotá night. For 1.4 seconds, it flew through space, fighting wind, gravity, and probability itself. It struck Volkov in the base of the skull, dropping him instantly. The tablet fell from his dead hands, shattering on the helipad. The 2 men with Volkov dove for cover, but Sarah was already engaging. Her shots were poetry in motion, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. Within 3 seconds, the helipad was clear. "Boardroom is reacting," Blake reported, swinging his rifle back to the primary targets. Through the windows, he could see chaos, men diving for cover, security rushing in, phones appearing as they tried to call for help. "Jammers are active," Michael reported from Prague. "They're isolated. Proceed." What followed was 15 seconds of controlled devastation. Blake and Sarah fired in perfect synchronization, their shots penetrating the reinforced windows that were rated to stop anything short of anti-tank rounds. They weren't using standard ammunition. Michael had provided something special, something that didn't officially exist, rounds that could punch through anything and still maintain accuracy. Kruger died first mid-sentence as he tried to rally his board. The CFO was second, his hand still reaching for a panic button that would never be pressed. One by one, with mechanical precision, Blake and Sarah eliminated every person in that room who'd profited from American deaths. But the 15th target wasn't there. Blake counted twice 14 bodies, 1 missing. 3 were 1 short. Dimitri Reeves isn't in the room. "Reeves?" Sarah's voice carried surprise. "As in, Michael's brother." Blake confirmed the revelation, hitting him like a physical blow. "Former Delta went private sector 5 years ago. Michael never mentioned, because I didn't know." Michael's voice cut in heavy with something that might have been grief or rage. "Dimitri was reported KIA in Syria. Another ghost, but working for the other side." Movement in the building caught Blake's attention. A figure in the stairwell, moving up, not down, heading for the roof, probably for a backup extraction. "I've got movement. Someone's heading topside." Blake repositioned, tracking the stairwell through the windows. The figure emerged onto the roof, Dimitri Reeves, Michael's brother, alive and armed. He moved like the operator. He'd been checking corners, maintaining cover. He knew there were snipers, knew where they had to be positioned. "Michael," Blake said quietly. "Do you want—" "He made his choice when he started killing our brothers for money. Take him." But Dimitri was already moving, and not toward any helicopter. He was setting up his own rifle, a massive 50 caliber anti-material weapon. Through his scope, Blake saw him aim it not at their position, but at something else entirely. Following the angle, Blake's blood froze. The rifle was aimed at a building 8 blocks away, a hotel, where, according to the intelligence updates streaming to Blake's earpiece, an entire SEAL platoon was staying during a diplomatic security mission. "He's targeting the Hilton. We have 30 SEALs there." "Take the shot," Sarah and Michael said simultaneously. But Dimitri had chosen his position perfectly. He was behind an air conditioning unit that blocked most angles, with only inches of his shoulder and rifle visible. The shot would have to thread between 2 buildings, through a gap barely wide enough for a bullet to strike a target the size of a playing card. Blake had made impossible shots before, but this was beyond impossible. This was miraculous territory. "9, I'm repositioning," Sarah said. 40 seconds. "We don't have 40 seconds." Through his scope, Blake could see Dimitri's finger moving toward the trigger. Blake did something he'd never done before. He stopped thinking entirely. No calculations, no wind assessment, no conscious thought at all. He became the rifle, became the bullet, became the intention of impact itself. His finger squeezed the trigger without his conscious command. The bullet flew true, guided by instinct and 17 years of muscle memory. It threaded the gap between buildings, caught a wind current that actually helped rather than hindered, and struck Dimitri's rifle just as he fired. His shot went wild, harmlessly hitting concrete. Blake's second shot, fired before the first had even landed, caught Dimitri's center mass. Michael's brother fell next to his rifle, blood pooling on the Bogota rooftop. Through the scope, Blake could see him trying to reach for something, a phone maybe, or a backup weapon. A third shot ended his movement permanently. "Target down." Blake reported, his voice steady despite the weight of what he'd just done, killed the brother of the man who'd saved his life. All targets eliminated, Sarah confirmed. Exfil in 2 minutes. But Blake was watching something else through his scope. Security forces were flooding the building, but one man stood apart, older, wearing an expensive suit, clearly not PMC security. He was looking directly at Blake's position, and he was smiling. Then he raised a phone, appeared to take a photo, and walked calmly out of view. 3, did you see? I saw. We've been made. Impossible. We're ghosts. Ghosts someone knows about. Exfil now. They moved to their extraction point, but Blake's mind was racing. The man in the suit hadn't been afraid. He'd been satisfied, like everything had gone according to plan. Like the PMC leadership had been sacrificed for some larger purpose. The extraction helicopter was piloted by the same stone-faced man who'd flown Blake before. But this time, he spoke. Prague is compromised. Alternate destination. What do you mean compromised? Sarah demanded. The pilot handed back a tablet showing news footage. The Prague warehouse was surrounded by Czech police and military units. The headline read, Terrorist Cell Discovered in Industrial District. Michael, Blake called over comms. Phantom 6, respond. Static. Then finally a different voice, older, graveled, familiar, but unplaceable. Phantom protocol is burned. All ghosts are to go dark immediately. Scorched Earth directive is in effect. Blake knew what that meant. Destroy all evidence, eliminate all traces, disappear completely. Every ghost for themselves, no contact, no coordination. The fraternity was being disbanded. Who is this? Sarah demanded. Someone who should have stayed dead, the voice replied. But recent events have forced my hand. The PMC was bait, and you took it perfectly. Now the real enemy knows exactly who you are, how you operate, and most importantly, how to kill you. The tablet in Blake's hands came alive with images, photographs of ghosts taken during operations. Sarah in Somalia, Blake in Venezuela, Michael in Myanmar. Others he didn't recognize in locations worldwide, all captured by someone who'd been watching the Watchers. Every ghost is being hunted as we speak, the voice continued. The organization that's been feeding intelligence to our enemies, that's been marking our operators for death, isn't foreign. It's domestic. It goes all the way to the top. And now they're cleaning house. An explosion lit up the Bogota skyline behind them. The PMC building's top floors erupted in flames, evidence being destroyed, but by whom? Where's Michael? Blake demanded. Safe for now, but he won't be for long. None of you will be. Unless what? Unless you're willing to break the most sacred rule of the Phantom Protocol. Unless you're willing to go public. Sarah laughed bitterly. Go public. We're legally dead. We don't exist. Exactly. Which is why your testimony would be so devastating. Dead men telling tales about who killed them and why. Blake's mind reeled. Going public would mean exposing everything the Phantom Protocol, the hundreds of operations, the entire shadow infrastructure that had saved countless lives. It would mean the end of the Guardian Angels. There's a congressional hearing in 48 hours, the voice continued. Closed session military oversight committee. They think they're discussing budget allocations. Instead, they're going to hear from ghosts. All of you who are willing. That's suicide, Sarah protested. We'd be arrested the moment we showed our faces. No. You'd be protected. I've made arrangements. Immunity in exchange for testimony. The chance to expose the rot that's been killing American operators for profit and politics. Blake looked at Sarah, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They'd given up everything to protect their brothers and sisters. Now they were being asked to give up even more: their anonymity, their effectiveness, their purpose. What about the operators who still need protection? Blake asked. Who saves them if we're all testifying before Congress? The next generation. The ones you'll train once this is over. The Phantom Protocol dies, but something better will be born. Something official but deniable, acknowledged but anonymous. What we should have been from the beginning. The helicopter was descending toward a military base Blake didn't recognize. Through the window he could see vehicles waiting not to arrest them, but to escort them. Military vehicles with congressional flags. "I need to know Michael's safe," Blake said. "I'm safe, brother." Michael's voice came through clear now. "I'm already at the hearing location. With some others you'll want to see." The helicopter touched down, and Blake saw them Rodriguez walking with a cane, but walking. Johnson still pale, but standing. Williams Chen Torres, and dozens of other operators Blake had saved, or who'd been saved by other ghosts. All here to support the phantoms who'd watched over them. Rodriguez was the first to reach the helicopter as Blake stepped out. "Master Chief, but you died. The training accident." "I did die, Rodriguez, so I could keep you alive." The reunion was overwhelming. Operators Blake had saved, without them ever knowing, all here, all aware now of what had been sacrificed for them. The gratitude in their eyes was almost too much to bear. Sarah was surrounded by her own saved souls, a Marine platoon from Sudan, an Air Force combat control team from Syria, Rangers from a dozen operations that had gone sideways until a guardian angel intervened. 10 minutes to brief, someone announced. Committee wants to prep before the hearing. Blake found himself in a secure room with Sarah Michael and 3 other ghosts he'd never met, an Army Ranger, a Marine Scout sniper, and an Air Force para-rescue specialist. All legally dead, all very much alive, all preparing to testify about operations that didn't exist to save lives that officially hadn't been in danger. "Once we do this, there's no going back," Michael said. "We'll be alive again, but we'll never be ghosts again. No more guardian angel operations." "Maybe that's for the best," the Air Force ghost said. "Maybe it's time for the shadows to step into the light." Blake thought about all the operations still to come, all the teams that would need guardian angels. Then he thought about the organization that had been marking American operators for death, using their sacrifice for profit. The choice was clear. "The only easy day was yesterday," Blake said. "Tomorrow we testify." The hearing was unlike anything Blake had expected. The committee members' faces went from skepticism to shock to rage as ghost after ghost testified. Michael went first, laying out the entire structure of the Phantom Protocol, the operations they'd conducted, the lives they'd saved. Sarah followed with evidence of the domestic organization that had been selling American operational intelligence names, dates, bank accounts, treasonous acts that went to the highest levels of government. Blake testified last, speaking not just about his operations, but about the cost. About watching Rodriguez nearly die, about killing Michael's brother, about the weight of being everyone's last hope. "We gave up everything," Blake concluded, "to ensure our brothers and sisters came home. We died legally so they could live, actually, and we'd do it again. But we shouldn't have to. The system that necessitated the Phantom Protocol is the same system that's been killing our operators for profit. That system needs to die more than we ever did." The committee voted unanimously. Full immunity for all ghosts, Congressional Medals of Honor classified but official, and most importantly, authorization for a new program still secret but legitimate, still deniable but supported. The next generation of guardian angels would have resources backing and, most importantly, protection from the very organization that had been hunting them. As Blake left the hearing, Rodriguez caught up with him. "Master Chief Blake, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't thank me. You pay it forward. You watch out for the next generation. You make sure that what we built doesn't die just because we're stepping into the light." "The only easy day was yesterday," Rodriguez said. "But tomorrow," Blake replied, looking at the Capitol building where justice had finally been served. Tomorrow might be easier. 6 months later, Blake stood in a training facility that didn't officially exist, watching the next generation of guardian angels learn the impossible shots that would save lives. Sarah was there teaching surveillance and counter-surveillance. Michael was instructing on psychological warfare through precision fire. The other ghosts were all there passing on their knowledge to carefully selected operators who would carry on the mission. The man in the suit from Bogota had been arrested, revealed to be a deputy director at CIA, who'd been selling operational intelligence for 15 years. The network he'd been part of was being systematically dismantled, its members facing justice for the American lives they'd cost. Blake's phone rang, a normal phone, now not encrypted or hidden. It was Rodriguez. "Blake thought you should know. Team Charlie just completed an operation in Lebanon. Everything went sideways, but they made it out. Said they had some incredible overwatch, someone making impossible shots from impossible distances." Blake smiled, looking at the trainee who'd been missing from class that day. The young woman, a former Marine sniper who'd died in a training accident 3 weeks ago, was cleaning her rifle with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just saved lives. "Good to hear, Rodriguez. Very good to hear." The Phantom Protocol was dead, but the Guardian Angels lived on. Different names, different structure, but the same mission, ensuring that American operators always had someone watching over them, someone ready to make the impossible possible, someone who would never leave brothers behind. Blake watched the sunset through the facility's windows, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, operators were preparing for missions that might go wrong. But they wouldn't be alone. They never had been, and if Blake had anything to say about it, they never would be. The only easy day was yesterday. But with guardian angels in the shadows, and sometimes in the light, tomorrow remained bright with possibility. The fraternity of ghosts had evolved into something stronger, acknowledged heroes whose greatest power wasn't their invisibility, but their unwavering dedication to bringing everyone home. Blake thought about that first mission in the Carpathians, about Ghost 6's voice on the radio, about the impossible shots that had saved his team. Now, he was that voice, for others, that impossible hope in hopeless situations. The circle was complete, but the mission continued. Tomorrow, someone would need a guardian angel. And tomorrow, one would be there. That was the promise, the covenant, the unbreakable bond between protectors and protected. Death itself couldn't stop it. Politics had tried and failed. Because at its core, the truth was simple: warriors protect warriors always and forever, whether from the shadows or the light. Blake picked up his rifle, heading to the range to train the next ghost. The only easy day was yesterday, but today was for ensuring tomorrow would come for those who stood in harm's way. And that was worth dying for, worth living for, worth everything.